Okay, Francis, it's 11:07. I think we should start. I welcome Dijiboy Day from RRC in Bangladesh, Mr. David Kataratambi from the Ministry of Water and Environment. You're all very, very welcome to this webinar. Joyce Nakalema of Contour. If you've just joined us, please type in the chat and tell us where you're joining from and the organization that you're representing or the interests that you are representing. Over to you, Francis.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne. We can start. Other members will join us later.
Sure.
Yes. I'm by the names of Chisto Francis Xavier. I'm standing in for our usual moderator, Dr. Calistide Mugaya. Apparently, we're having a steering committee meeting for the Institute, and he's part of it. So let me start by giving the opening remarks on behalf of the Institute. I want to take this opportunity to thank the team from Contour Consults for taking this opportunity of presenting during this 8th webinar of the Water Resource Institute with collaboration with the Water Resource Institute. For today's webinar, we are going to be focusing on leadership as a building block for functioning water utilities. And this presentation is going to be made by Anne Namakula of Contour Consults. Anne is a utility expert with a master's in environmental sanitation and with 15 years of experience in provision of sanitation, water supply and sanitation services in Uganda and also Nigeria. As we always do, we'll start with some remarks from Contour Consults, and this will be followed by an interactive presentation, followed by a discussion for the webinar. We will have some time for questions in the middle of the presentation and later after the final completion of the presentation. And I want to remind you members that this webinar starts at 11 a.m. and it ends at 1 p.m. Once again, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for sparing time and be part of this webinar. For those who are attending for the first time, we initiated this program for the webinars. That was in December. And we agreed that every last Friday of the month, as the Water Resource Institute, we hold this webinar. Such webinars, we call upon our different partners who would like to share their works they are doing with the rest of the world, reach out to us and we can schedule them on our program. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francis. I am going to share my screen and I'm going to put on my video briefly. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm not certain if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, that is very, very, very good. Can you see my screen, Francis?
Yes, I can see it very well.
Okay, good morning once again. You're all very welcome for this webinar. My name is Anne, as I've been introduced, and I'm a water utility expert. I'm going to take us through this webinar this morning, and the webinar is really focusing on leveraging partnerships in order to mobilize external financing. And in this particular webinar, we are focusing on leadership as a vehicle, as a building block for financing water utilities. Water utilities are the case study here, but generally it's all water and sanitation. Before I proceed, I know Francis has spoken about the Water Resources Institute, but I just want to emphasize that the Water Resources Institute really bridges theory with practice. We all went to school, some of us went to school many years ago, and along the way we need to refresh, we need to also know what is new and applicable to the situation in which the sector is. So there's a lot of dialoguing that is promoted by the Institute in order to eventually steer some policy changes that are really key to safe water and sanitation delivery. I will speak briefly about Contour. Contour Consult is a human resource and organizational development consultancy firm. We are based in Uganda, and we believe that it's important to create shareholder value through the strategic management of people. I'm an engineer, and I know that infrastructure is very, very important. I don't underplay that, but we believe that once we have infrastructure, there should be order, there should be organization, we should mobilize and have an optimum return on human capital. The expertise we bring today is really in water utility management and wash entrepreneurship coupled with sustainable financing. This year, Contour Consult has done some relevant assignments to this conversation, and we are building an ecosystem of the wash market in Uganda. We've also looked at, we've done mentorship, we've partnered with the Water Resources Institute to implement a mentorship program for ladies who are in their mid-career. And so far, this program has graduated about 86 ladies. Lastly, Contour Consult has looked at the performance of the regional utilities that we have in Uganda. There are 6 umbrellas that had a performance contract with the government of Uganda, and Contour Consult was able to assess the performance of this contract and also draw a new performance contract, which is now at the level of the Solicitor General. So with this introduction of Contour Consult, I want to take you to the business of the day, which is to really talk about financing. Before we do that, I'm also going to share a video, and the video will set the stage for this conversation. Just give me a minute as I navigate between the windows. Just a minute. I'm going to share a video that shows a broad perspective of what we are talking about today. Francis, I'm looking for this. Okay, it's coming your way.
In today's interconnected world, we face complex challenges. And at the heart of them, there's one element that connects us all. Water. Every year, we use more water, yet global availability is constant. If we don't act soon, by 2050, water scarcity may threaten up to 5 billion people. In 2015, the global community agreed on a unified agenda to solve these challenges. These common objectives were called the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. These goals should be achieved by 2030. Like water, they are all integrated. We can achieve them if we come together to manage our limited water resources like never before. That's why UNIP DHI Center, CAPNet, and GWP have joined forces to establish the SDG 6 IWRM support program, a platform to accelerate and coordinate effective action. Different stakeholders, but together they have a common goal: to understand the water-related challenges, design viable solutions for them, and implement integrated responses to help countries achieve the SDGs, joining the dots between countries facing similar challenges, helping them to act locally, achieve their national targets, and link them to a global movement.
Francis, are you there? I let the video play, but on my screen, it's quite muffled. I don't know if it's the same for your side.
Yes, it was, but the message was delivered.
The message was delivered. I'm sorry about that. Juggling the video with switching from one to another. But as you've seen from the message, it's really talking about the fact that water is a common factor. Water is embedded in everything literally that we are doing, either as a business or as a community or as a society. That is why in all the SDGs, water is really key in meeting these SDGs. So right now, I've switched you to my screen and we are going to stay with the PowerPoint. We can see that with all the 17 goals, the 2030 agenda has been compressed and compacted in these 17 development goals. And water is key in meeting all, if not most of these SDGs. And I now want to interest you in a report. There is a report that was recently released by the International High-Level Panel on Water Investments in Africa. And this report is called Africa's Rising Investment Tide. This report is produced by a panel, as it's called, a high-level panel, chaired by 7 presidents, where we have the Senegalese president and also President Jakaya Chikwete as the co-chairs. This report clearly demonstrates that in order for Africa to really meet the 2030 agenda in terms of water and sanitation, there is a requirement of $50 billion. And if you divide by the population or the projections, this means $40 per person per year by 2030. Now, this is an uphill task, and it calls for us to think differently. It calls for us to do things differently. And if you really look at the current investments in Africa, they range between 10 billion to 19 billion a year. Those are the water and sanitation inflows into Africa. And there is a very, very huge gap. So when you look at some of the schools of thought that want to encounter or are moving to encounter this challenge, there is a school of thought on systems where infrastructure is key, but then everything else around infrastructure must also be happening. At least these building blocks, as you can see on my screen, there is finance, planning, monitoring, institutions. They should be at a certain minimum level of achievement or operation in order for us to steer the water and sanitation achievements in the right direction. And if you can look closely, this kind of thinking requires us to unlock what we already have. There's a lot of investment happening in the water space, but then how do we unlock it? How do we optimize already what we have in order to attract new investments? And this is when we zoomed into one specific box or system part, which is a building block, and that is individual leadership. That is leadership, but leadership is at 3 levels. They are individuals, we are all individuals, and we have different motivations that come from our different values. We also see that leadership should happen collectively. Many times we stop at individual leadership. There's a lot of motivation around self, but then in order to steer this conversation further, we need to focus and see how our institutions are growing. And of course, eventually, if many institutions are growing in a better way, they start to impact society, and there are different coalitions of power that start to come from how the institutions are shaping that discourse. However, we should always know that there is always something, there is always a system wherever it is. When you go to a place and you don't see a bank, don't think people are not banked in a certain way. Even when you're not banked at all, that is the system you have. So even in water and sanitation, sometimes when there is an intervention, it's always good to start from what is happening right now. Where are people getting water from? Where are people going to ease themselves? It may be open defecation, and that is the system at that time, given the conversations that you get from the communities. So I want to really now emphasize the fact that when you see an institution, when you see how government is shaped, how utilities are shaped, it also has a lot to do with the individuals, and most of us are part of these institutions that we seek to change. We are moving parts of the institutions that we seek to grow. And there are different schools of thought, excuse me. There are different schools of thoughts on how institutions can change. For some institutions, there's been a big bang, there's been a certain conflict, there's been a critical juncture, and we see a major shift, and then something emerges. Then for others, there is sometimes a certain conflict, and that is also a discourse that I'm talking about. But then in a good way, we want to see institutions that are actually transforming in order to respond to the values or beliefs in society at this time. And right now, as I showed you the SDGs, the underlying value, the reason we are all gathered here is to see how we steer communities to have safe water, to be water secure, and to have sustainable sanitation. So this conversation is aligned to the school of thought where we need to transform institutions to respond to that value and belief in society. And normally, as I've mentioned, that institutions are not really empty. They are part of society, and they come out of how we interact as human beings. I now want to talk about people. As you see, Contour, we believe that we should do value creation through people. And when you go to institutions, as I mentioned, they are people, they have their self-interest, they have cultural beliefs, and at the same time, these people embody what they believe depending on their positions and influence seeps to the institutions, and that institutions embodies a certain character and is transmitted through the institution. And now we also have we can have a very strong leader, a very patriotic leader. And we've observed that one person being courageous and strong is not really sufficient to navigate some sticky situations. This is because these people need to acquire a certain level of power and network, and also an opportunity to act much depending on the political context. This goes back to the fact that we've done mentoring for women with the Water Resources Institute, and it has been focusing a lot on individuals. But then, and that is a good step, but then as time goes by, the thinking now is to say that unless an individual, unless an institution is in a certain environment, unless they have certain power and networks and opportunities, their individualism is not sufficient. So how then do we see these institutions evolving? And these institutions can only evolve if their leaders really rely on power, resources, people, ideas, and followers. Yes, and followers. And when you look at utilities, because there are case study today, when you look at utilities, I'll really use the umbrella organizations in this country. If you're not yet familiar with them, there are about 9 formal utilities in Uganda, water utilities. There is NWSC, which is National Transmission Corporation. Then there are 6 regional utilities that are called umbrella organizations, and their mandate is really to directly manage water supply and sanitation in 6 regions. National water, as the word is, it's national, so it goes across the whole country. Then the other 2 I've not mentioned are quite localized. They're in specific towns, and I will not mention much about them. But to go back to these umbrellas, these umbrella organizations took over quite a number of systems from different places, NGOs from some are in refugee settlements, others are in relatively small towns, others are in very, very big towns. And all these schemes, all these water systems came with a certain, they all have different variations, whether it is size, whether it's population, whether it's even the infrastructure, the way the configuration is. Some have solar powered pumps, others have gravity. It's all a whole lot of configuration. And what matters here is that the umbrella organizations have to be very, very specific on some things that must be standardized, even as they take on more and more systems. The systems are there, and that is very good, but the governance and asset management with so many configurations has to really be clear in order to be receiving more and different configurations and see how to even manage the customers. Even the configuration of the customers is different. Some customers wonder, why are we paying for water when it is God given, it's running from the hills? Others are wondering, why do we have this kind of tariff? We used to have a nice tariff. So the umbrella organizations at a certain time have to come up with a standard way of entry into these different towns, so that as they take on more and more towns, there is a full deck on how governance must proceed in each and every one of these towns, and of course, asset management. And then as you see institutions evolving, there are always some, can I say, collective problems. These kind of problems always lead to a shared goal, yet very few people are willing to work together because maybe there are high risks. If you look at catchment management, when you look at catchment management, water resources is the first thing that a utility should really think of, yet the conversation is always deferred to DWRM, which is the Water Resources Management Department of the ministry, and that is fine, but there is cooperation needed here in this kind of challenge. There should be a new thinking by utilities to know that our business starts here. We must cooperate and we must prioritize these catchments. Then we also see in utilities, sometimes there was a barrier to cooperate. And this was really on the sanitation side. I will give some other examples, but sanitation is something I had highlighted here. While these utilities are seeking to grow their sanitation arm, it starts with the community itself, and now it's easy to see in Kampala, because in Kampala, as you go to the slums, you will notice that when it rains, people release their waste into the open drains. So those kind of people deter others from paying to empty their pit latrines, because there is that free rider mentality. People are like, why should we pay when there's an alternative? So there are quite a number of barriers to cooperation, and this is also for back to the regional utilities as they get into the different schemes which they are taking over. There are some schemes that are gazetted to these umbrellas, but then you find that they directly manage a much less number, because the local governments or the politics in that particular town either does not trust, or they feel that the tariffs are high, or they have an internal dynamic that we are not so sure of, and they bar cooperation. Then as we continue to talk about these evolving institutions, and the leader who is sometimes a manager or a managing director needs to start somewhere. They are not acting on their own, they are actually representing the interests of a nation. And for Uganda, we have the NDP3, which is the National Development Plan, and it clearly states the aspirations of Uganda as a country and where we want to go. And then on the global stage, we talked about the SDGs, and it's important to know and understand the alignment between the national goals, but also the international aspirations. I know very well that there is a fiscal strategy that informs the allocation of resources to critical sectors. But that also means that there must be a vision. The utility leader sets a vision, and these visions, there is a lot of thinking that should go into them, but also commitment. It's not just to say, okay, we have this on paper and it stays there. And I want to point back to the report that I mentioned at the beginning, which is authored by the International High-Level Panel on Water and Investments in Africa. And this kind of report seeks to see that each African country has 5% of its GDP. No, I'm mixing up numbers, but the message is that for most of the African countries, they lose about all the African countries lose about $50 billion annually because the investments in sanitation and water are really less. They are not yet there. They are not yet at optimum level. And this comes really from the national commitment, and then it trickles down to the sector and eventually to utilities and any other players of a kind. I also see that sometimes it is the way we frame our conversations. It is the way we frame our advocacy. I'm coming from the utility space, and we talk a lot about non-revenue water. And non-revenue water really represents wasted resources, and it's very, very good. But when you read many utility reports that go out beyond the utility, it remains as a percentage. A lay person in this case will not understand much what this percentage is all about. It doesn't show that this percentage denies a certain group of people water, a certain population water. So there is need to change our framing of how we take these matters to the national level. If we remain in a very, very technical posture, they are very, very difficult to understand. Then there is also a lot of financing that is going to the climate change, the energy security conversation, and aligning green technology with the current situation. Water and sanitation should be bundling itself with these conversations. Normally, it's not prominent enough from the different things that we see. Water and sanitation is not prominent enough to show that it is actually at the middle of the climate change crisis. The front runner at the moment is energy, and energy is an enabler of water. Also, energy is something that we get from the waste. So many water and sanitation conversations are not taking advantage of this key circumstance around us, and they are plainly still just water and sanitation. you can see that utilities spend a lot of energy. If you come to central Uganda, many of the systems are actually energy fed because of the terrain here. There is need to pump the water to wherever it's needed. So we have some opportunities that we can actually really harness. I now want to go to narratives, and all this takes a particular leader to have these conversations and steer them to where they should be. There are quite a number of narratives I have had since I joined the water and sanitation space. Those narratives have been here with us for a very, very long time. Sometimes it's because people do not want to offend, or they think it's very politically sensitive, but then it will only take us, the leaders, to navigate these conversations. I also want to mention that leadership is a position sometimes that is really level 1 leadership, but we all know that we are leaders where we are placed, and we are called upon to steer these conversations. Many times sanitation is taken as a private conversation, and yet when you come to the wash space, it is a full value chain. I speak to friends and they keep on wondering, they are surprised that sanitation is a full value chain, right from containment up to reuse is not common, up to the last part. So this discourse has to change if we are to get funding for sanitation, because we are not acting in a vacuum as water and sanitation. We are acting in competition with all the other sectors. What is the narrative that they know about water and sanitation? I want to also speak about seemingly similar ideas that can really be persistent over a long time. While utilities are supposed to get a certain revenue, they are sometimes undermined in continuity. Their own sustainability is in a balance. It's in a kind of a phase that I'm looking for the right word, but the continuity of utilities is threatened because of the underlying same social problems that they seek to solve. When you go to many of these towns, the people will pay for water for as long as the water is running. They will pay for it. However, these same people have representatives at different levels of government who keep on thinking that people cannot afford water. So the tariffs are actually capped, and this is sensitive, but the tariffs are continually capped, and yet this keeps on undermining the continuity of the utilities themselves. Yeah, so that is something that that consistently hampers the utilities. So with this, I've been mentioning some opportunities that that institutions like a utility can take advantage of, and one of them is to really see that the utility operations are not just selling water or people buying and paying for water, but utilities do exist in this space where we have the environment. They get water from the environment, they use water from the environment, and water is returned to the environment at one point. So they need to frame themselves not as just in quotes a vendor for water, but as part of an ecosystem. And because there's a lot of sustainable finance out there, but if someone doesn't really know the details, they may disconnect the utility from the environment. Then there is a lot of opportunity in terms of developing leadership across all levels. while at one point I was talking about an MD, I was talking about a manager, the impact of the utility is felt at the community, at a household level, by the person who walks into my gate. And we need to develop leadership at all these levels, because the interface between me and the utility is the meter reader or the plumber or the customer care person on the phone who answers my questions. So there is need to find the kind of structures that will support these water utilities in able to develop the human resource that they have. I see that there are normally ongoing water operator partnerships that have abbreviated as WOPs. These are very good entry point. They are a low-hanging fruit that utilities can harness in order to develop the capacity of their people. Also, there is a very good low-hanging fruit, which is cooperation among institutions. And this can be sector to sector, or it can be within the sector, because if there is some level of cooperation, this attracts very, very big tickets of funding. And yet at the same time, there is peer-to-peer learning, people learning from what they know, people learning from what they see and similar contexts and circumstances. Then I also want to mention that I am a subscriber to a certain portal which is called The Big Deal. And this shows how financing is coming to Africa. Private financing is coming to Africa. And you see that fintech takes it all. Fintech takes it all. I had mentioned energy, but when it comes to fintech takes it all. They really take a very big percentage of this financing. How can utilities take advantage of this conversation of digital migration? I see there's a lot of payments from wherever you are, but I think there is much more that can be harnessed if utilities seek to see that they are part of the financial inclusion conversation. The institutions that give wash loans, can we increase the number? Can we increase the threshold? If I want a new connection, can't I go to a bank, to a microfinance, to a SACCO, and I pay in installments? But this conversation has to start with us in interesting these financial institutions. Out of the 34 big financial institutions in the country, those are banks, only 4 actually have a portfolio for WASH. So there is a lot of work that we can do to get many more. And if you go to SACCOs, there are so many SACCOs and MFIs, there are over 300. I'm not certain of which percentage has a WASH portfolio, but I have quoted the ones for the big players. And yet the SACCOs and microfinance institutions are really embedded in communities, and they are low-hanging fruits that we can take advantage of. Then we see some local actors in our communities that can really work with utilities very well. And these are WASH entrepreneurs. There are pockets that the utilities will not be able to serve. And these pockets are currently being served by the entrepreneurs. What synergies can be harnessed at the moment to see that this is going on very, very well. I now want to talk about monitoring, and I see that monitoring and evaluation is very, very key. When you look at how we started with the building blocks. There was one on planning. So right at the stage of planning, one has to know how they're also going to monitor and evaluate whatever they are planning for. And there are now very many ways of monitoring and evaluation. And I have highlighted some of them. But what is very, very key is to actually do is not to just take it as a process, but to learn along the way, to tell the story. Yeah, a lot of good things are happening in water and sanitation, and the stories are known only among us. We gather, we speak to ourselves, and the world out there does not know the kind of impact that we are seeking or we are part of, then also we should have some real-time reporting. Some things come when they are long gone, and the kind of M&E framework put in place maybe for our projects, it's a mid evaluation, which is maybe 2 years, and all the way in between there has not been any simple real-time reporting, and this is not good. So I want to talk about the monitoring and evaluation, because if we are to plan, we are planning to, at the beginning I mentioned of those building blocks, and I was planning, we have to align all the plans to the national plans, yes, but then the SDGs are the universal language that we really all understand, even someone outside Uganda does, because they are an international protocol. So when we are planning, we need to understand which of these SDG, this is SDG 6 in particular. So if you look at SDG 6, which is really the one for ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all, it has these different goals, sub-goals, and please mute Joseph. And in our planning, we need to understand which of these are we contributing to. And the Ministry of Water and Environment, through the Water Resources Institute and supported by WaterAid, developed an SDG 6 training manual. From this manual, the players can see what they seek to contribute to, how to track it, and how to report on it, while well aligned with the SDGs. This is very, very important, because if you seek to partner with another person, if you seek to speak the same language, you need to use a universal language, which is the SDGs. So you need to move from your own language, maybe as an NGO, as a utility, as a business, and move to the universal language, which is SDGs. I'm sure Francis will tell us more on how this training manual is actually going to be of use to all of us. Yeah, that was the last, the cooperation and participation. I'm now going to spend some time here, because there are no words. So I'm going to spend a lot of time here, and you see the S-curve. This S-curve shows us, has time on the x-axis. I hope you all did some little math, where you see time in years, that is the x-axis, and then the other rising axis. Yes, Francis.
Yes, and I was proposing that maybe we have a session of questions and answer.
I'm about to finish.
Okay.
Yes, I have very few slides remaining, probably 1 or 2. So when you see this curve, you realize that the outcome or the level of achievement where a utility is a sum of different things. It may be people, it may be infrastructure, it may be politics, it may be the community where it is. It's a sum of very many things. But I want to talk about just investment. And when you see the lower part where I've written investment, if a utility is to grow, it has to, let's say that it's just beginning, like how the umbrellas are still young. They started in 2017. So if they are just starting to grow, there is a high level of investment required. And this high level of investment at the moment can only, has given them a certain level of achievement. However, if they are to start to leave the investment band and enter the growth band, there must be a lot of domestic resources because it is so difficult to get a significant amount of funding when you're not yet rising on the S-curve where there is growth. So that means we need to mobilize domestic resources further. We need to have impactful spending in order to reach financial leveraging. Unless we do that, for a long time, the umbrellas may be stuck on this investment side. Yet, in order for them to reach more people, to serve more people, they have to cross to the growth band. And when a utility crosses to the growth band, it easily attracts resources because, as you see, a certain amount of resources leads to a very high jump in growth in a very short time. And most of the external resources want a very short band of time because they are not that patient. It's government that has to bear the brunt of this investment. That means that government has to really put key monitoring and evaluation frameworks that will lead to more impactful spending. So in conclusion, I've spoken a lot, Francis, as you said, but in conclusion, these are the different opportunities for partnerships, just as we were talking. And you can see that something is eating up you can see that if utilities know that they are part of an ecosystem, they can really align to sustainable finance or impact investing. We talked of credit or consumer, we talked of micro franchises and community financing. They are people who are financing systems for a whole community. There is credit consumer, which can be for new connection. And then there can also be micro franchises, like how you see Jibu Water, if you've come across Jibu Water. Then there are opportunities in resource management where you're managing water, you're reducing the non-revenue water, where you're conserving the environment, you're making sure that the source is protected. Then there is decarbonization financing, which is for the energy transition. Those are really mainly solar packages. And the other opportunity is technology and innovation. I've really mentioned about reporting, where you can use real-time simple reporting, where you can empower people with a mobile phone and they report very well. The data is clean. Where you have technology supporting climate resilience, and also there are very many opportunities where it's important to see that there is public-private financing, where public finances are used to de-risk the private finance. And also, being a woman, I must tell you, there are so many resources that are just gender specific, and it's called gender lens financing. Lastly, on a way to really improve, I mentioned that there is an SDG 6 training manual, and it gives some possible frameworks, some specific terms and pathways that we can use to report specifically on SDG 6. And we can also give you, we can guide on visual communication and for sustainability. A lot of the good things we are doing are not yet out there because we are not really communicating them. With that, I want to conclude and say that in case you want to know more about innovative financing and opportunities, feel free to contact us at Contour Consult Limited. Over to you, Francis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that elaborative presentation. I'll request Rosmita to come in as our moderator. Thank you.
Am I audible enough?
Yes, please.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I think colleagues online. We are very privileged to have Anne. Anne is a pundit in financing of the water sector. And we can just give a small clap. Each one of us can just send an icon, and we appreciate you, Anne. We don't take your wisdom for granted, and we do appreciate the fact that we are able to share from your long-term experience worldwide on WASH, and so we don't take that for granted. There's nothing we can pay you for this kind of wisdom that you have highlighted. Colleagues online, we are now getting into the question and answer. I could hear my co-moderator was anxious to allow people raise questions. But before we raise questions, as our presenter gave an overarching conclusion, I would like to share some key highlights that maybe can help some members reflect. What has been very informative in this presentation, of course, given the background that we started in, which was the global contextual understanding of how WASH sits in the SDGs, that was given by my co-moderator. And in the highlights of our presenter, Anne, the issue of institutional changes has become very, very important. So we could raise and think about it if you have questions around there. The global institutional changes that are taking place, national, right up to household, where she told us about perceptions about in terms of WASH, water being perceived as a free resource. And she said very importantly that there's need to change the framing of things, the way we are looking at things. And I think, Anne, we thank you very much, because this is a paradigm shift where we are seeing commercialization of water, which is a transformation of perceiving water as a free resource. So let's raise some questions around there. What kind of, how can we frame things so that they are understood around the new generation in WASH management? Issues in landscape changes in terms of climate financing, the nexus, and also very important, and we thank you so much for having pointed to us that we need a structured approach to WASH. We can look at value chain approach, which is one of the structured approaches. We can look about that system thinking in terms of key actors, system dynamics, responsive management that you talked about. And very importantly, you also highlighted the need for digitalization of WASH financing, technologies, innovation, softening components like soft loans that can be extended. So colleagues online, I'm not here to reiterate what has been mentioned, but I thought in our moderation style, we could highlight things so that people raise questions that we can help to move this agenda of WASH. As you all know, colleagues, WASH is getting very much entrenched into the Water Resources Institute. So we are bringing in a series of WASH webinars so that we can be able to conceptualize as Water Resources Institute, what is it, what agenda can we frame for things to move forward. So I open the floor for Q&A and to our moderator, presenter, sorry, to take note of this so that by end of this clock, at the top of this hour, we should be closing. I submit. Colleagues, Q&A is open for action.
Can I start, Moderator Rosmita?
Please go ahead. Your name, question.
Thank you, Moses Musitwa. Moses Musitwa has done a number of WASH issues, but greatly in the Rotary circles. I just want to learn from Anne, the evaluation you did on the umbrellas, their performance. Can you summarize that for us?
Okay, I'll take 3 questions and then answer 3 questions.
Hello.
Okay, next question. Your hand is up.
My hand is up, Kate.
Hello, team.
Kate? Can we have
yes.
Kate Namialo?
Yes, thank you, Anne.
And then the next person was a gentleman.
Oh yeah, thank you, Anne, for the wonderful presentation. I've been listening in throughout, and I want to talk about how can we, maybe you can make me understand or make us understand, how can we cater for the vulnerable, the poor, when it comes to water, them accessing water. For example, the utilities, how can they incentivize the service so that even the vulnerable, those who cannot afford, can be able to access clean water and sanitation services, because we are looking at leaving no one behind if we are to look at the global context. So please make me understand how we can do it so that we can, maybe we can learn something from you regarding that. Thank you.
Okay. Can I speak?
Yes.
I'm Tumuhereze Joshua from KRC Uganda. That is Kabaro Research and Resource Center here in Fort Portal. I appreciate the message. We have also been implementing a WASH project in partnership with Water Aid. But a quick one, what we have found out at the institutional level, we have always seen healthy facilities, for example, in terms of sanitation, the toilets, the latrines are not favorable for these vulnerable members. For example, the disabled, you'll find the toilet is not favoring. Someone is on a wheelchair, someone is unable to stand, unable to walk. That is one of the key challenges we need to look at. I don't know who will be responsible for that. For example, in a health facility, if a vulnerable person is visiting a facility, what are the key stakeholders that should be involved in making sure that the structures like toilets are well favoring the vulnerable? Then another one, we have lessons learned from the project that we are implementing. Much as we are talking about WASH amidst available sources that we have here, we have noticed that WASH needs, actually, as you are implementing it, it is like an intermediate outcome. For example, we have seen people where they are given food, they eat and they really remember to wash hands after eating. So to me, I think we should also focus on more sensitization, on awareness. That is a software that can move along with the hardware, as you mentioned. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joshua. I'm going to take those 3 questions right now, then we shall move to a new set of questions. And there are some questions in the chat, but let me start with the ones that were spoken. Moses, the Rotarian, asked about the evaluation of the umbrellas. What is the summary? We see that the umbrellas have brought a certain semblance of order and expectation in how water is managed in small towns. And before they took over those particular towns, you could see that there was a certain level of, I will call it entropy. There were different players doing different things. But then in the few towns that they took over, we see a certain semblance of order. It's not yet at 100%, but it gives a certain level of expectation of how things should be at the moment. The umbrellas are actually now there is a project which is called professionalization of the umbrella organizations. And this is really fine-tuning further on the expectation that once the umbrellas are more professionalized, this is the service that we expect to find. These are the standards of how things should be done, and this is the level of achievement they should aspire for. However, the learning also was that umbrellas they have been staffed of recent. They have more staff, but these staff are still thin on the ground, and there is need to have a stronger strategic arm of the umbrellas, and this is what the professionalization assignment seeks to do, to see that the higher level of strategy is really going well before, because once the strategy is going well, then the operations will actually fall in place. There are key things that are really being spearheaded to move forward, and governance is really one of them. Now, moving to Kate asking about the vulnerable, because I mentioned about affordability, tariffs, and that is true. We see that the consumers are segmented in each and every community, whether in Europe or whether in Africa or Uganda, in Kasese, wherever you are, life segments us, and there are people for many reasons that become vulnerable and are poor. There are studies going on, there are initiatives going on to which I will call pro-poor, to see how best to serve the poor. But when you enter a community and that is your opening statement, the community will say we are all poor, and so there are ongoing initiatives to actually differentiate and segment and see who is really more vulnerable than the other. There was one that was piloted in the East. I see someone from Eastern Umbrella here. I may call them to ask to share their experience in the East and also in the Central. There was one being piloted in Midwestern Umbrella. But the message I want to give here is that getting the right pocket of the poor is an uphill task. That is a message I want to really give. And in the spirit of leaving no one behind, I see that the umbrellas will move into, at the moment, they are using the last mile as the people who request for last mile is where how people get the service. The people who request for new connections as into their compounds are really seen as the ones that are not in the poor segment. The people who choose to walk to the PSPs, I know PSPs are more expensive. That's a totally new box I've opened, but we need to do more to understand which pocket to really serve in the rightful way as poor, and yet keep their dignity and keep their dignity as fellow human beings. Then there was a question from Joshua on who should be the stakeholders. Yes, health facilities are also institutions, and they are part of the people we seek to serve. I saw a report on health institutions, and it was a sad report on the access of safe water and sanitation there. But then you mentioned the actual access, the physical access of someone to enter a facility, the people who are using wheelchairs, etc. That discourse is really it goes back to, it's really the way the facility is planned. The facility has to be planned in a way that it is safe and can be used by all the people. So the physical access is more like a physical, a planning thing, infrastructure, structural thing that I believe that the Ministry of Health should put as a standard. Probably it's already a standard. I don't know so much about health, but I believe it's a standard, and we should seek to have it enforced. Joshua, as a partner, you should seek to see that for all the health facilities that are coming up, you can influence the modification of those where you're working as a beginning step. That is what I think of. Yeah, I have answered those questions. I see some in the chat. Rosmita, do you want to get for us some questions in the chat?
Yeah, I think you can answer those that you see in the chat as we generate more. Colleagues, we can prepare 3 more. We still have some time, so you can respond to those in the chat because they came in earlier.
Okay, that's
thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with with Edith. Edith is asking about strategies. What strategies are there to reach the communities in mountainous areas? Is that still Kasese or, okay, Kasese, Mbale, the places we know have hills, Kabale? What strategies are there to reach the communities in mountainous areas? This seems to be a question for the ministry itself, but I know that there is a sector investment plan, Edith, and eventually it goes down to the different arms of the sector. And also there is a big divide, which is the rural-urban divide of how investments are made in Uganda. So I see that this is best answered by us checking how the rural or the urban departments seek to serve these communities. Then I see a question on carbon, which companies in Uganda undertake carbon trade or financing. The one for trade, I know there is EcoTrust. There is a way in which because they need large scales, economies of scale. So they organize farmers and do this the whole conversation on carbon trading, EcoTrust. It is the one I know. Then for financing, these must probably be from external financing, and I can share just after the call. I don't have them offhand, but there are quite a number that are going on. But what is key, let me mention what is key is scale. The scale that one wants to, you can't have an acre of forest and talk of carbon financing. It's more like square miles and something like that. It's really a huge scale that eventually gets financed. Then Julius asked, what are the steps to get WASH services for CBO project implementation? Julius, we need a bit of context, but I know this CBO needs to have its own strategy. So is WASH part of the thematic areas for the CBO? If the answer is yes, then the CBO eventually has to be answering a certain need in a particular community, and then they design WASH services that are answering that particular need in a community. One last question is from Lasto, who is saying that he wants a job and he doesn't see jobs for men. They are limiting only the female gender. Normally the advert says female people are encouraged to apply. So Lasto, please apply. They're just encouraging the female people to apply. Yeah, so thank you, Rosmita. Over to you. I've run through most of the questions on the chat.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And thank you for the precise answers. And colleagues, these are very formative questions. And I think as our presenters said, that the issues of perceptions, I remember when the discourse on WASH started, people were like, WASH, those are issues of women. Maybe that's where we got it wrong. And now that we see that no, WASH is more of technical rather than gender specific or social oriented, then now I like the voice that I need a job, but I think it's oriented towards women. And that gives us evidence that the initial perception of WASH was that it's a game of women and it's a responsibility of women, and therefore women should be able to attend the meetings, they should attend the capacity building. Now that we almost have 2 decades of illuminating WASH, we see the women have the capacity because they attended all those serial capacity building initiatives. But we are glad that we also have people like Sitwa Moses who have been at the front line of WASH. So maybe you could liaise with such colleagues who have the experience, male colleagues who have experiences in WASH, and they can also share their experience and also encourage you and give you pointers on how to really become a specialist in WASH when you're a male that has been a female-dominated arena. So colleagues, I open the second session of questions and answers. Sorry, the third one, because the other one was for online. So we now have third from online colleagues, which is verbal. If you have your hand up that I'm not seeing, please go ahead. If there's nobody with a hand up, pick a mic, first come, first serve, and then you raise your question. As Anne has set the precedence, we take 3 questions and then she will answer and then we come back. We still have some time because we really need to exhaust this agenda because it is going to shape a number of the Water Resources Institute capacity building initiatives. So we really need a very grounded discussion on this. Over to you, colleagues online with questions.
Yeah, thank you, Rosamita and Anne, for the presentations. It was really a very insightful presentation. And you really mentioned that in Africa, we need around $50 billion money to invest to reach everyone with safe and acceptable water and sanitation services. Now, one of the biggest issues has been, where would we get all this money when all people, most of organizations are depending on donations, on grants, when actually this huge amount of money calls for investment. Now, the irony is that what we have as utilities are very risky. For all people who have done financial analysis on utilities, they find them as risky ventures. Unlike for energy, you know, like they can easily invest in energy, but for water, it's risky because that also comes with the regulations around, the perceptions around waters are free good, you know, all that. And maybe it is not something for you to answer now, but for me, it's just a request for if the Water Resources Institute could help us to prepare a webinar on how best could we de-risk utilities so that they become attractive for investors. Because honestly speaking, we are not going to get all this money from donations. We need serious investments in the water sector. And until utilities become financially viable, until they become worth of investment, we might not get what we want. So you might not answer, you might choose not to answer it right now, but we might need to explore more on how to de-risk utilities to make them more worthy of investment. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. I'll take two.
Next. Okay, and as we take the next one, maybe preparing, can we add this question to the one in the chat on the management frameworks?
Yes.
And before Anne says, I can also say on behalf of the Water Resources Institute, we've taken note of your concern and we shall look at it maybe since we are having a series of webinars on WASH to ground this subject, we shall talk to our keynote presenter, Anne, and then we add, she's also a facilitator with the Water Resources Institute, and then we see how we address this as a technical knowledge issue. Anybody online so that we can add to the question on frameworks plus this one? Okay, Anne, can you answer these? Can you give your note on this plus the one on the framework?
Okay, I want to really talk about players' concern. It's true that water utilities are very, very risky, and their being risky is really embedded in their governance. They are all most of them, probably 95% on the continent, and in Uganda they are government leaning. They are all government leaning, and that the intersection between being government leaning and at the same time the human right to water, that conversation starts to make them very, very risky. So in order to de-risk these utilities, the beginning is really governance. The beginning is governance. How do we get their governance right? That is the beginning. How much interference are they getting from different places? And because also the same question on frameworks, what frameworks should WASH partners employ to meet global attention? The key, which the door and the key is on governance. How are we having our utilities governed? How transparent are they? Do they have a physical, they scored a duty towards the communities they serve? Those are very, very difficult questions to answer. And as Claire noted, how do we then get these utilities to the beginning is in governance. It's a journey, and also governance doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey. It's a journey, and as I said, the report I quoted earlier spoke well and said that we need to have more impactful spending, which is domestic. Because if domestic spending is actually well utilized, then there is a trust that is built, which gets that utility. If you saw the curve I shared, it gets the utility to start rising, to be a growing utility. It comes away from just being small, but it starts to grow, and then the other boxes are ticked over time. It's a sticky question, but it's where we are going as an institute to say, how do we de-risk the water sector? It's a very, even when you see the inflows, water has very, very little, because we are also quite we are slow in adapting to technology. It's another reason why even the trust is low from other players. I have combined the de-risking and the frameworks. Really, the key and door is governance. Someone mentioned that the role of education at all levels seems to be underplayed, and that is true, and that is why we've mentioned it here, that it is something that we should take up. I see some questions, Rosmita, in the chat.
Yeah, proceed with the chat questions.
What
there are quite a number, yes,
are being deployed to promote education in the WASH sector? Rose, to promote education. Rosmita, do you want to answer this question?
The one on promoting education?
In WASH sector, in the sector.
Okay, I can chip in, and I think for me, as we have opened the series, this is about institutional strengthening in terms of capacity, and this is an appropriate question for this forum. One of them, you have seen that there's integration of, first of all, in the new curriculum, which has been rolled out at all levels, primary and lower secondary levels, WASH is one of the elements that are in the new curriculum for education. And this is embedded in answering the question like the moral education. So as our presenter Anne said, that the perception that people have about WASH as being either a a backyard activity, is something you don't bring into the front line, it's an issue of women, it's a reserve of maybe those who are the poor. So you realize that the new curriculum focuses on morals and how to use safe use of these facilities and how to be hygienic, things like that. And also in the secondary level curriculum that was rolled out for the collective learning about science, WASH, water, sanitation, health, and hygiene, actually that's what they call it, is one of the aspects that are evaluated under science. So in terms of education, since we are in the transformation of the curriculum, I think WASH is already having a frontline attention. And I think the only challenge is that at higher level, maybe graduate university, we don't see this aligned very well, except in public health, but you just see it as a practice. So I think you're right, Teddy, we really need to give it more attention at all levels. from primary, secondary to higher level of institutional learning. Even at PhD, it would do good somebody to do a PhD around WASH. So we take that and we shall continue the discourse in terms of education. And also as the Water Resources Institute, we have an element of applied research where I am part of the team. And so last year we received a number of abstracts on WASH, like the WASH scorecard, the WASH practices. So we encourage that even next Water Week 2024, we can even have more people present abstracts on WASH. And we even encourage new abstracts which are just proposals for undertaking interventions. So this is how we can promote through education, applied research under the Water Resources Institute to address the issue of WASH in terms of academia. I submit, and you can proceed.
Thank you, Rosmita, for that elaborate answer. And also now at the utility, like the utility context, we need to see more capacity built right from the top leaders, middle, and then the last mile people, the plumber and the meter readers, and the communities themselves. Traib is asking that, is there a plan to incorporate climate change mitigation measures in WASH projects? Actually, there is, and there are quite a number of guides there. It is also important to note that it is more of resilience, climate change, climate resilience. There is now, it's really a must, it's no longer an option, but there should be climate resilient measures embedded in all WASH projects. Then I want to talk, Patrick said that a lot of effort has been put in water supply, but more still needs to be done in sanitation, and that is a right observation. That is why we are saying that we should now see how do we change the discourse so that also sanitation also gets attention in this era. Someone mentioned that communities are sharing water with animals. That is Joshua. So he's asking how can we involve UA to be vigilant? This is a stakeholder arena, a stakeholder issue. And Joshua, since you're right at the front line in the communities, I still want to give this back to you to engage UA so that we see that there are watering points right within the jurisdiction of UA. These animals migrate. I really lived in Queen Elizabeth for 2 years. They keep moving, and water is one of the reasons that they are moving. Probably UA has to do climate resilient interventions to make sure that water is secured for the animals within their boundaries. Then someone is asking about Julius, WASH coverage in Eastern Uganda. It is segmented into water and sanitation, so the coverages are different, but also the districts are different, and some districts are doing much better than others. I don't have the numbers one by one, but the general picture is that it is segmented and some districts are doing better than others. And even within a district, a certain sub-county probably does much better than another sub-county, and even a parish can do much better than. So it's really differentiated depending on the name or the district that you're talking about. Yes, I'll take just this one and I switch back to Rosmita. Geoffrey is asking, is saying that the water treatment plants are not effective and this is affecting water quality. What strategies and action plans are there to overcome this? This is true, Geoffrey. It's at a utility level, and it's really how they choose to operate these plants. Some plants are not effective because they are overloaded. They can be batch. I went to a refugee settlement, and there was batch loading of a treatment plant. The treatment plant was designed to receive certain amounts over time, but then they would go and pick a lot of waste from the communities and just load it at once, and this choked it. So it's in the operations. How are they operating? And this will differ from one plant to another. You may also find that there are issues of maintenance. How often is dislodging done? There may be issues of the actual, some quality. I was in Ginger some years back. I used to be an area engineer in Ginger. And at one point we got water quality that was foul. It was from industries. This wasn't supposed to come into these domestic wastewater treatment plants. So there's a lot of questions that you have to answer depending on the kind of plant that you've come across. But I'm happy to support that conversation. Over to you, Rosmita.
Okay, yeah, great. And thanks, colleagues, for the interactive discussion. I've just seen one trickling in on we need a study to understand why hand washing has dropped after COVID. Yeah, these are the things we are talking about. We can engage, even if somebody did a study by next year, Water Week, we could have results and then we share. This is something very, very important. And colleagues, nowadays, there is a methodology that we are promoting, which is a low cost or even no cost methodology for, sorry, for data collection. You can do digital data collection. You just have colleagues, you know, or even you can post on WhatsApp a question and people answer, you collect the data, you analyze, and by Water Week next year, you can even present indicative, which we call a snapshot study, and it can interest other people to continue the discussion and do in-depth studies. So don't wait for, say, Contour Consult to do a huge study or survey. All of us now can be, with digitization, all of us can now be researchers, and then we can now share our concerns as findings. So you can use your colleagues as a platform. If you need assistance from the Water Resources Institute to frame your questions, we are there to support you. So by next year, you have a presentation on why hand washing has declined after COVID, and so what is the implication? So this is a very exciting comment that you have posted. Colleagues, do we have any other questions? Because we really have a huge opportunity to have a pundit with us, Anne. So let's utilize her capacity and the time that she has given to us. It's a rare opportunity to have a well-informed, all-round specialist like Anne. Any questions, clarifications? Any remark from anybody, any burning issue?
Faith.
Thank you.
Faith.
Thank you, Anne, for your insightful presentation. My name is Faith Gabona Kadondi. I work with Makerere University Business School at Awambale campus. Just a few remarks or thoughts I want to clarify. You talked about mentorship, there being an opportunity for mentorship of women. I don't know if you could throw more light on that and how one can get involved. Then you talked about us having more conversations around the issue of sanitation, because most of the conversations around climate change. Recently, we had a conference, a women's conference in climate change at our main campus in Akawa, and there was minimal conversation around the issue of sanitation. So I would like to request, I don't know if through your school, the school, the institute that you're talking about, and through WASH, we can encourage more conversations around this. On top of advocacy, we create awareness at the rural levels. Because if you realize, most of the sessions are done here in Central, and yet you have umbrellas and we have regional campuses. So how can we partner and continue this conversation in these spaces? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you. I am going to speak about the mentoring program for women. The mentoring program for women seeks to build the capacity of middle and young career women in the ministry, not just the ministry, but the sector of water and environment. And this mentorship program looks at two things: the technical part, because Ministry of Water and Environment has a big technical conversation that, as you see, not just conversation, but topics, interventions, and it's also not just engineering, because I'm an engineer, most people think it's engineering. No, if the conversation on environment, climate change, that is what we are calling technical. It's not about pipes and pumps, okay? Then the leadership part is to really stimulate the ladies to be leaders from the positions at which they are right now. It's not for them to wait to be the permanent secretary, because there's only one PS, there's only one director at a time, and we are all called to be leaders where we are. So that is the philosophy of the mentoring program. This mentoring program, I see, we brought on board people from the regions for the last cohort, and we learned quite a number of lessons there. And one of the lessons we learned is that it should really be more physical. Everything should be physical, but at the same time, we also see that there should be more sensitization on the program in itself, so that we get more entrants, more people from the regions to participate. Most of them were seconded by their bosses, and they thought they're just doing it for their boss or something. So we want to see a more simulated group of people, and this we have a plan with the institute to do more sensitization before we actually enroll members, so they understand what they're signing up for. In terms of partnerships, you said that there was a climate change conference in Nakawa. I didn't participate, but I am on that group of the women in climate change, and I see the conversations there. What I should say is that I think one of the action points coming out of this is that at such forums, the nexus should really be highlighted, because as I said, I told you that many times water sanitation is not well framed, it's not well bundled with climate change, yet over 90% of the effects of climate change are water related. So that is for us now, the practitioners, to have this coming out in the way we frame and bundle the issues at hand. And I think it also comes as an action point, Rosmita, on we need to do something to make that nexus very, very sharp as we go forward. There are two questions in the chat. One was asking about how CBOs can be engaged in implementation of WASH projects. CBOs are embedded in communities, and you can be like the VHT, the village health team. I hope you understand the analogy there. But since CBOs are embedded in communities, you can actually do a lot of advocacy. You can do a lot of what is it? Proofing that this is happening. As Faith mentioned, there are so many things happening in Kampala and very little happening in the grassroots. We may think it's little, but it is now the CBOs to actually illuminate these things and say, no, there is also this in this community, it's going well. You can foster community learning. It doesn't have to be just individuals. You can foster community learning. You can foster, as I said, evidence. You can engage in evidence to show evidence. You can be, Rosmita talked of the research. You can be the one reaching the households. There's a lot you can do as a CBO. You can, Julius, there's so much you can do. You can contact me and we discuss it. There's so much you can do as a CBO. Then you can organize communities to say, okay, today we do Bulungi Wansi, we let us clean the well. You can say so much. Before there is a project, you can be the one doing sensitization for a particular project, so that you're the entry point of a project. It's a lot you can do, Julius. Just get in touch and we talk. Yes, Edith.
There's one on rainwater harvesting.
Oh yes, I keep on keeping it. Someone is asking me how is rainwater harvesting and wash attached? Rainwater is a source of water, so it's a supply of water. So when we ask people in primary school for sources of water, then you get answers like the river, the lake, the what, and then rainwater is also one of the sources of water. So that is the connection between wash and rainwater harvesting. Yes, the others are comments. Edith, thank you for appreciating. I will really consider you. And Edith is a gender expert. There is so much to do with gender. Making wash can benefit from gender financing. Yeah, I see Lillian, thank you. I see Isa, thank you for listening in. Jen Akot is interested in research. You can contact the Water Resources Institute for further information on research, but you have to have a specific topic. I'm sure they will guide you. Yes, over to you, Rosmita. I'm just going to put I'm putting my number in the chat. I'm putting my number in the chat, but I also want to say that there is a dialogue, there is a conversation where I share opportunities. I share opportunities for financing in WASH. And people can join this platform and they get the opportunities as they come in. It's a WhatsApp group where we share as they come in. I just share them on that group and people check them for their own use and probably propagate the right relationships to get the financing. Yeah, over to you, Rosmita. I can also share the link in the chat for that particular WhatsApp group.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne, for being very resourceful. And it's not just about sharing information, but I can see the way forward, because normally when we do these webinars, we are encouraging to have practical opportunities for the way forward, not just sharing information like any other webinar. And so we thank you so much for taking the lead, Anne, in this, sharing the way forward, the opportunities and the links. Colleagues and those who are online, I would like also to emphasize that as you get these kind of opportunities, please act on them. Seek for collaborative capacity building. If there's something you don't understand, of course, you don't expect Anne, she's a consultant, to come and do the proposal for you, because most of these opportunities require you to express yourself technically, maybe in form of a concept or proposal or idea note or a competitive grant pitch. So you wouldn't expect her to do that, but if you want, she can do it for a fee. However, make use of the teams that are online, make use of the Water Resources Institute, so that before you really overload her with your expectations, because she's a consultant and you know what that means, at least you have something that is well shaped for her to really be able to support you, because we wouldn't also want to have our technical people come here and they are overloaded with a lot of feedback, which puts them off the rail. So that's a disclaimer, Anne, and we take responsibility because these are our participants, but in case there's something they need support, always you can also come back to the Water Resources Institute. You can ask her for guidance, and as it takes shape, like somebody has said, I'm interested in research. So you can also go to the Water Resources Institute. We have applied research. I have already guided you that they are snapshots of doing research. Now we have digital data collection. You have platforms of people where you belong. You can throw in, and that is already a cohort. You analyze, and then you share, even if it's one slide, and say, come on, I just put a quick methodology out there. and got information, and this seems to be the perception. So what conversation can we have around this? So we can even have a webinar around that. We can even integrate it in the applied research presentations during the Water Week, and you get support from the Water Resources Institute. You present your idea, it's vetted by the abstract committee, and then you make a way forward. So who knows how you will end up with that. And so colleagues, that's the purpose of this platform of the Water Resources Institute as a webinar. It's not business as usual. It's just way of building capacity of people in the water sector. It's about sharing knowledge with pundits like Anne, who have done a lot of work, and they're in their resting positions, but still very willing to support, especially the young career specialists. If you don't share or don't tap into this kind of opportunity in terms of knowledge, where else would you give it? Also, the philosophy of the Water Resources Institute is that how do we build capacity on top of what you have gained in the mainstream academia? So that's why we bring experts to share with us, to give us opportunities, to give us linkages. So with that, colleagues, I think you have had a fruitful discussion. I would like to bring this to a close, as we had promised that by the top of the hour, we should be getting out of here so that people can go and do other things and reflect on what we have done. So I do see only thank you messages. I hope we have not skipped anybody's question or clarification, because it's not our practice. So if we have, please post it in the chat and we shall give you a private answer. Otherwise, I would take this opportunity as an associate with the Water Resources Institute to declare this webinar closed on behalf of the leadership of the Water Resources Institute. That is Dr. Kalist Tindimugaya, our commissioner, who is our father in this. We have Gwendolyn Chomhendo, who is not with us. She's the coordinator of the Water Resources Institute. The Water Resources Institute is based in Entebbe. That's where we have our headquarters at the Ministry of Water in Entebbe. We have Francis, who is with us. Please always get in touch with him. In case you have something very quick to communicate, he's in charge of IT, he's in charge of the organizing these webinars. You have him, Francis Kizito, as you can see, Xavier. You can inbox him, you can get contact. So in case you want any follow-up, please get to the Water Resources Institute. Anne is there, she can lead you back and forth. And so with that, I declare this webinar successfully closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosmita. Sorry?
Thank you.
The link. Sorry, Moses.
Yes, the link.
I'm trying to get the link. If you can just stay online for the next 5 minutes and wait for just online. I'm getting it. Sorry, I'm getting it.
Okay.
Yeah, just don't close the.
So the rest you can leave at leisure.
Yes.
Yeah, and we are still open, so we still have more time, and you can use it for your administrative protocols with the participants.
Okay. I wanted to find out when the next mentorship will happen for the women in mid-career.
Oh yes, Rosmita, do you know?
Yeah, she needs to check with Gwendolyn. Because I think now they're about to send out, or even they have already sent out the calls, because by November we should have the participants selected. So get in touch with Water Resources Institute, Madam Gwendolyn, or you continue engaging with Anne. We shall get the information from there. But I think very soon, already soon, the draft for the announcement is already out. Okay.
Okay, that's very true. Kate, where do you sit? Kate.
In Luzira.
You sit in Luzira.
Yes. I'll walk to Gwendolyn's office and find out. I'm in rural department.
Okay, that is very good. In fact, we hadn't got people from rural, so we are happy to have you.
Thank you.
We are happy to.
And male colleagues online, there's also been a male mentoring session. The first cohort was, I think, engaged this year. So there's that opportunity also. It's not gender specific for women, but they have started, the first cohort, I think, started this year for male mentors. So you should also not lose out, because we have now had a balance of both.
Yes, I've sent the chat link. I've sent it. I share opportunities on financing WASH entrepreneurs and clean energy, because there's a nexus. We can no longer just talk about water or just energy. It's a nexus, and you can engage with us, and there's a lot of conversation there on the opportunities. I want to thank you all. Thank you very much. I wish you a pleasant afternoon. So
thank you, Anne.
You can just give it 3 minutes for people to pick the
Okay,
chat.
no problem. No, it is okay.
All right. Have a pleasant afternoon. Thank you for supporting the
Thank
call.
you. Thank you so much.